We're just about to get started, everybody. We could get to your seats. It is 8 o'clock, and it is time to begin our service for those who are here and those who are joining us by live streaming. So we are welcoming everybody. I want to wish you all a Shana Tova. Let us begin with Ma Tovu, a video that we'll join with together. This is not the Rosh Hashanah that we imagined. It's not the Rosh Hashanah we imagined a year ago, where we thought that by next year we will be back together, no problem. It's not the Rosh Hashanah we imagined 6 months ago, when many of us were getting vaccinated and wondering and dreaming how many truly could come back together. It's not the Rosh Hashanah we imagined, certainly not even a month ago. We had lots of hope. Things seemed to be getting better, and then the Delta variant came along. And yet, it's the Rosh Hashanah we have. We mourn our losses. We pray for those who are stricken with COVID. We also express gratitude for all of us who have survived. For those of you who are in our sanctuary, and those of you who are at home, this is not the Rosh Hashanah you imagined. And yet, this is what you have. To find appreciation in our blessings, to remind ourselves of the importance of community, to celebrate the beginning of a new year with a hope that we can find as much sweetness as possible. In the words that we recite in eating apples and honey for the first time, we say, Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu shetachadesh aneinu shana tova umetuka. May it be your will, O God, God of our ancestors, renew us for good, for a sweet year. Let us all say, Amen. Tonight, as we will for each service, we're going to be announcing 2 sets of pages. For those of you who are here in the sanctuary, or those of you at home who have taken the Machzor Hadash, the traditional Machzor prayer book that we use for the High Holy Days, we'll be announcing 1 page. And for others who are at home, who have downloaded the Rabbinical Assembly Machzor, we're going to announce another set of pages in which you'll be able to follow along. If you haven't yet, by the way, you can find them on our website, the link to the Machzor from the Rabbinical Assembly. And we will, if you're a member, you can download it at no cost. And in general, we will be announcing the first set of pages for the Rabbinical Assembly Machzor. The second set is for the Machzor Hadash, the ones that you're using here if you took one home. And but you're going to see very quickly, you're going to be able to find it. After 18 months of a pandemic, I no longer take the call for the Baruch Hu for granted. It's predicated on the idea that we have a community present. When you do the services by Zoom or by live streaming, you don't have that sense of a community. You can't hear the response of voices. A minimum of 10 gathered together in prayer when the Baruch Hu is decided. We gather together this year in person, and those of you who are with us at home. Whether you're in your backyard, whether you're in your living room or at a kitchen table, whether you're watching on a big screen TV, a laptop computer, or a smartphone, I'm talking to people at home, not to those of you who are here. All right, let's just make that clear. Whether you're dressed at home as you normally would for services or enjoying the casualness of being at home, for all of us, whether here at home, the Baruch Hu beckons us to stand, to acknowledge the power of community. The Baruch Hu you will find page 5 or page 18. We rise, please.
Guy, 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 Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
You may be seated. Join with me in a responsive reading on page 19 for those of you in person. In the middle of the page, praised are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, whose wisdom brings on the dusk of evening. Opens the gates of dawn.
Your understanding regulates time and season.
The stars above follow their appointed rounds in response to your divine will.
You create day and night. You alternate darkness and light.
You remove the day and bring on the night. You separate one from the other.
We call you Lord of heavenly hosts. You are our living God.
May you rule over us as you rule over nature. Praised are you, O God, who brings the evening dusk. Page 20 or page 6 for those at home.
El Chai v'Kayam, Tamid Yimloch Aleinu La'olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv Ha'ravim. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח לחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגד יומם ולילה. Join us with those words. כי הם חיינו, כי הם חיינו, ואורך ימינו, ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגד יומם ולילה. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגד יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני. אוהב עמו
I'd like to share with you a poem about hearing, written by Rabbi Jack Reamer and one of my favorite rabbis of all time, Rabbi Harold Schulweis of blessed memory. The person who attends a concert with his mind on business hears, but does not really hear. The person who walks amid the songs of birds and thinks only of what she will have for dinner hears, but does not really hear. The man who listens to the words of his friend or his wife or his child and does not catch the note of urgency, notice me, help me, care about me, hears but does not really hear. The woman who stifles the sound of her conscience and thinks, I have done enough already, hears but does not really hear. The person who listens to the rabbi's sermon and thinks that someone else is being addressed hears but does not really hear. On this Rosh Hashanah, oh God, sharpen our ability to hear. May we hear the music of the world and the infant's cry and the lover's sigh. May we hear the call for help, the lonely soul, and the sound of the breaking heart. May we hear the words of our friends and also their unspoken pleas and dreams. May we hear within ourselves the yearnings of our hearts that are struggling for expression. And may we hear you, O God, for only if we hear you do we have the right to hope that you will hear us. Hear the prayers we offer you this day, O God, and may we hear them too. The Hebrew word Shema reflects this idea of hearing. The words of the Shema come from the book of Deuteronomy, if you don't know, Shema Yisrael. They're spoken by Moses to the new generation, the Israelites who are about to enter the promised land. He exhorts them to learn from the lessons that they should have learned as they wandered in that wilderness. Moses tells them 14 times in the book of Deuteronomy to listen, to hear, not just the voice of God, but to listen to each other, to listen to the way they've traveled together for so long, to listen the ways that they have learned together. When we're better at listening, the more likely we are to hear what we need to know and do. Let us all strive to be better listeners in the coming year. As we prepare for the Shema, listen, Israel.
Our God is one. Listen, Israel, Adonai, our God is one. Sing it with me. Listen, Israel, Adonai, our God is one. Listen, Israel, Adonai, our God is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen, Israel, Adonai, our God is one. Listen, Israel, Adonai, our God is one.
Page 6 or page 22, Shira Rosh is going to lead us in Shema and De'ahavta. We join along with her.
Shema
Yisrael,
Adonai
Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך בכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך ובביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בעיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובישעריך.
Join with me, please, in the English translation of Ve'ahavta. We'll read together. You shall love the Lord your God with me, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. You shall take to heart these words which I command you this day. You shall teach them diligently to your children, speaking of them when you are at home, when you are away, when you lie down at night, when you rise up in the morning. You shall bind them as a sign upon your arm, and they shall be a reminder above your eyes. You shall inscribe them on the doorposts of your homes and on your gates. We continue silently in the following words, Hebrew or English.
Adonai yimloch Elohechem be'emet U'malchuto b'ratzon kiblu alehem Moshe u'vnei Yisrael Lecha anu shira b'simcha rabah ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בקודש לא רוצה לא עושה מלכותך ראו בניך בוקי הים לפני משה זה אלי אנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כיבדו אדוני את יעקב וגאלו חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני איי 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 גאל ישראל
We all show up with so many prayers in our hearts this evening, but one of the prayers that I know is most real and most pressing for all of us is prayers for healing, for those who are in need of it. Healing of body, of mind, of soul. A lot of us could use a little bit of healing. If you're joining us by live stream, you might need a bit of healing as well, and people that we love, people we're thinking of. So we'll join together now. We'll sing along with the video, Rifa'inu.
Refa'enu Adonai v'nei Rapha. God, only you can bring true healing, and so we pray. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei Cholei Amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Shechinahu, restores our loved ones, heal our people speedily in our day. V'nomar Amen. Refa'enu Adonai v'nei Rapha. God, only you can bring true healing, and so we pray. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei Cholei Amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Shechinahu, restores our loved ones, heal our people speedily in our day. And let us say,
We turn to page 30 or page 9 for Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leshalom, ve'hamidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Aleinu sukat shelamecha, Baruch ata Adonai.
We're all here on Rosh Hashanah and the High Holy Days to be woken up a little bit from whatever slumber we've been in. It's time to wake up. And what better alarm clock could there possibly be than a shofar? So we'll hear now Chazan Stein, Tekah Shofar, page 33 or page 10 for those at home.
shofar, gadol lecheruteinu, tikal b'shofar, 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 gadol
Once upon a time, there was a man named John. And John lived in an area with an incredible JCC, an incredible Jewish community center that everyone in his community belonged to. That JCC was where everything happened. In the morning, everyone would be there working out at the JCC gym. In the afternoon, he'd run into everyone he knew working out, whether at the JCC gym, at the pool, maybe having a snack at the cafe. In the evening, everyone would be there using the meeting rooms to join together as a community for social gatherings. And no matter what was going on in John's life, he could find the answer at the JCC. If he was feeling sad or guilty about something, the JCC had a support group for that. If he was feeling overwhelmed with gratitude, the JCC provided channels for giving back. If he was feeling just a bit lonely and in need of companionship, he could find that at the JCC too. John's life was completely structured around the JCC, as was everyone else's in his community. One day, John started hearing news from other areas that a terrible plague was coming. Others around him didn't seem so worried, figuring there's no way the plague would really spread to their community, but John felt differently. He became anxious that his whole world was about to come crashing down around him, that his whole way of life was going to change. If this plague truly hit, he and his community would be left without access to their JCC. And how would they continue to live their lives then? What would they do in the mornings without the JCC gym? And in the afternoons without the pool and the cafe? And in the evenings without the JCC meeting rooms? Now, you might think my story takes place in early 2020 and that John is worried about the COVID-19 pandemic. No. My story takes place in the year 70 CE in Jerusalem. Distraught about the potential loss of the JCC, better known as the temple, John, better known as Yochanan ben Zakkai, hatched a plan. He snuck out of town, far away from where the plague, better known as the Romans, would strike and destroy the temple. He decided it was time to get creative. He thought, if we Jews can no longer count on having the temple as our central gathering place, our community center, we needed something else. If we could no longer worship at the temple by bringing sacrifices in the mornings and the afternoons and the evenings, we needed something to replace it. If we could no longer turn to our temple-based sacrificial cult when we were guilty of a sin or full of gratitude, we needed another outlet. Yochanan ben Zakkai and the other rabbis refused to accept that the destruction of the temple would mean the destruction of their way of life. They knew there had to be some way, some creative solution to their problem so that they could continue living their lives Jewishly, even if what Jewishly meant would be radically different. So before the Romans had a chance to destroy the temple, Yochanan ben Zakkai snuck out of the holy city of Jerusalem in a coffin, and he established what would be a new center of Jewish life in Yavne, with Torah study rather than temple-based worship at its core. He and his generation of rabbis were forced to completely reinvent what Judaism was. They couldn't use their one central temple anymore, so they based Jewish community at multiple synagogues and study halls. They couldn't perform sacrifices anymore, so they invented structured prayer services. Priests couldn't be their leaders anymore because there were no temple-related duties for them to perform, so wise, learned rabbis became the leaders instead. These rabbis remade the entirety of Jewish practice, not because they wanted to, not because they took a survey and decided that maybe people felt a little disengaged from the sacrificial cult, but because they were forced. And it's not like they had the opportunity to experiment with change slowly and see how each new element was going. The change had to happen immediately, decisively, and without looking back. These courageous Jewish pioneers were put in a situation that felt like a dead end, that felt hopeless, that felt like it gave them no options for how to move forward. What if the leaders at that time had thrown their hands up, hung their heads, and given up? What if they had decided that the destruction of the temple left them with no choice but to give up practicing Judaism? Luckily, a few brilliant and creative leaders decided that there were, in fact, choices on the path forward. Choices about how to reinterpret Jewish practice for times without a temple. And now we've been practicing that way for nearly 2,000 years, and we have no desire to go back. I don't think any of us truly wants to go back to a sacrificial cult instead of praying and studying. The first century leaders' last choice for how to live a Jewish life is now our first choice. At the beginning of this story, when we were talking about John and the JCC instead of Yochanan ben Zakkai in the temple, you could hear the parallels to today's pandemic. The pandemic is a very similar moment in history, a moment where we felt our normal way of life come crashing down on us, a moment where many of us felt we didn't have our normal array of options for how to spend our time and live our lives. Certainly, in the Jewish community, we felt our options slipping away when it came to practicing Judaism communally. In April of 2020, I got a phone call from my mom telling me that my great Uncle Sam had contracted COVID. And then I got another phone call from her telling me that my great Uncle Sam had passed away. My mom and I sat on the phone trying to figure out what to do because he was in New York City at the epicenter of the pandemic. There was no way at that time that I could safely get there. And even my family members who lived much closer were told that the cemetery wouldn't allow them in for the funeral service. My mom and I came to the awful conclusion on the phone that Uncle Sam wouldn't have family members at his funeral. We had no choice. Today, when we talk about this over a year later, I'm sure you know what we did at the time of the funeral. I'm sure it seems obvious, right? We gathered over Zoom at the time of his burial. We arranged a Zoom to have a virtual funeral service for him to share memories and say prayers as a family. But that wasn't so obvious in the moment. If you had told me about Zoom funeral services and Zoom Shiva Minyanim 18 months ago, I would have thought it was ridiculous. I would have told you, we don't need that. We show up in person. But circumstances changed, and we were forced to innovate, whether we liked it or not. And you know what we learned? That having a Shiva Minyan by Zoom allows more people to attend. It allows people from all over the world to come and fulfill their obligation of Nichum Avelim, comforting mourners. It allows people who might feel awkward about the social component of a Shiva call to attend and just listen. It means that mourners don't have to arrange a deli platter and host dozens of people at their homes in the midst of their grief. In fact, now that people can have Shiva Minyanim in person, many are opting not to, because we discovered something special in this forced situation, that Shiva Minyanim work on Zoom. What's truly important about Shiva Minyanim, the opportunity to comfort mourners, that can be accomplished on Zoom. Beyond just Shiva Minyanim, one of the biggest areas of forced change was prayer services in general. We held Shabbat services through Zoom and by live streaming, and we experimented with so many different formats. Speaker view and gallery view, and then once we could go back into the synagogue in a limited capacity, outdoor services and indoor services, singing together, not together, clergy in the sanctuary, clergy from home, multiple camera angles. We tried more different formats of services over the past 18 months than a typical synagogue would try in a decade. And the lessons we learned were mixed. We learned that more people can attend, whether they have a way physically to get to Temple Aliyah or not. And we learned that some people are more comfortable attending from their homes. But we also learned that we can't fully welcome new people into our community through Zoom. And we can't walk up and stand next to someone as they recite Kaddish, one of my favorite customs in this community. We can't join our voices together in song. In trying to still access the essence of what it means to pray as a community, we've had mixed results from our experiences of prayer in this crisis moment. We can gather to pray by Zoom, but we will miss some aspects of an in-person community. Perhaps the most pressing and least possible mitzvah from the past 18 months has been Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. We place a very high value on visiting people when they're ill, reminding them how loved they are and sharing prayers for their healing. And of course, during the pandemic, no one has been able to do any in-person Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick whatsoever. So we've turned to FaceTime visits and Zoom visits and phone calls. And FaceTime visits to the sick are a lot better than no visit at all. But nothing compares to being able to look someone in the eye and offer a prayer, ask how they're feeling, hold their hand, and sometimes cry alongside of them. That's the essence of the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. FaceTime and Zoom can capture some and not all of that essence. And one day, when it's safer to be in person with those who are ill, some people may still want in-person visits, and some people may prefer virtual. With these three examples, Shiva Minyanim, communal prayer, and visiting the sick, we've had mixed results. But most importantly, we've learned that when we are backed into a corner, there was an escape hatch ready for us if we could dare to find it. That escape hatch required us to see what was really important about each of these mitzvot and creatively replicate it virtually. Last March, when we could feel the world closing in on us, we desperately searched for options. We searched for options in a situation that felt like it took away all of our options. Some communities, like Orthodox ones in particular, determined that there were no options for Jewish communal practice, so they did not adapt. They didn't allow people to count in a Shiva Minyan by Zoom or provide live stream or Zoom services on Shabbat. But for us, when all of our usual ways of functioning were taken away, we chose to reimagine and adapt, just like the first century Jews in Israel did. Just like our whole world did. School was moved online and employees started working from home and telehealth and teletherapy caught on. I meet with all the B'nai Mitzvah students in preparation for their big day, and this year I asked each one of them whether they prefer in-person school or virtual school, and the responses I got were about half and half. It might surprise you, but half of our students actually preferred learning from home for various reasons. Maybe they didn't have to wake up so early to drive to school, they could wear more comfortable clothes, they weren't as distracted by other students, and about half preferred learning in person. They could be with their friends, they could be more active, maybe it was easier to learn from an in-person teacher. In every sector of our lives, we've learned lessons about change. Some changes that teach us something new and pleasantly surprising, and that way perhaps we can sort of keep the essence of a mitzvah but perform it in a different way. And there are some changes that teach us the importance of the old way. We did not sit down last March and decide it was time for some experimentation. Just like Yochanan ben Zakkai after the destruction of the temple, we didn't voluntarily take on this project of reimagining aspects of Jewish practice and really all aspects of engaging with the world. None of us wanted this. But we had no choice, so we found new choices. When have you felt like you had no choice? When have you felt backed into a corner and looked around thinking, is there no path out for me? When have you felt trapped? Trapped in a bad cycle in a relationship, trapped in a bad job, trapped in a bad financial situation? When have you looked at your life and thought to yourself, I have no choices, I'm stuck? We've all been there, not just during these past 18 months, but throughout our lives. We have all had those moments of darkness and desperation. On Rosh Hashanah, as we reflect on the past year and look towards the year to come, here's what I'm taking away from this pandemic. When it feels like there are no choices, dig deeper. Much of the time, if we can get creative, seek advice, open our minds, courageously push boundaries, we can find the choices that are within our reach. They will not be our first choices, and they won't be our second choices, and they probably won't even be our 10th choices. But once in a while, falling back to our last couple of choices can open the door to hope. Because that's what hope is. When we eliminate our choices, we eliminate our hope. And when we realize the choices that we do have, we fill with hope for the future. When we know that we can have agency over our lives by making choices, that's what gives us hope, that maybe things will be okay. And once in a while, we'll discover alternative ideas that are far better than just okay. We'll join together now in Chatzi Kaddish. You can find it on page 34, or for those joining us at home, page 10.
Yitkadav, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irutei, ve'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yamechon, u'v'chayedecho. Beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kariv, v'yimeru amen. Yehei Shnei Rabbah mevorach, le'olam lo me'amaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei Kudusha Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'yemeru
It's not always easy to find the right words to express our thoughts, what's happening in our life. Don't you wish you always had the right words? Your home, appreciate a spouse, to acknowledge a new life, a child, a grandchild, to be able to think about a bat mitzvah and how we feel about that moment. Coming up with the right words is not always easy. You ever have trouble finding the right word? And when you don't know what to call something in particular, there's actually a word for that, dingus. When you have no idea what that thing is, you call it a dingus. As if somehow to give humor to the fact that we can't find the right words. In prayer, finding the right words is so important. To be able to translate the feelings of our heart, the emotions we're feeling, to turn them inside and to be able to feel a holy moment. That's why we have this meditation before the Amidah, A meditation, Adonai tzvatai tiftach ufi yagid tilatecha. God, please open my mouth that my lips may proclaim your praise. The idea of helping us to articulate how we feel when it's not so easy. I'm going to turn to page 36 or page 11. I'm going to ask you to rise, whether you're here in the sanctuary, you're at home as well. You're going to join with us in the sacred moment. Before we begin the silent Amidah, we'll join together Adonai tzvatai tiftach ufi yagid tilatecha, and then you'll turn to your private prayers of meditation, either Hebrew or English, or the private meditations of your heart.
Adonai, Ananana, Sfatai Tiftach, Ananana, Ufi Yagi, Ufi Yagi,
Our private prayers. you've finished, you may be seated. If not, please continue. We're going to join together through a video. Oseh Shalom. We all join together, please.
Oseh Shalom Bimroma Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom V'imromav Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'imru
Kaddish Shalem, page 19 or page 50.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ויעלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביום בכל ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגאלה ובזמן קריב שמי דקודש ברכו בנחמתה דמירן בעלמה תושבחתה בנחמתה דמירן בעלמה תושבחתה בנחמתה דמירן בעלמה צלוטון ובאו לכל בית ישראל קדם אבוהון דיבי שמיה דיבי שמיה דיבי שמיה ואמרו יש למה רבה מן שמיה וחיים וחיים עלינו עלינו ויעקב ישראל ויעקב ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו עלינו ויעקב ישראל
Kiddush, page 24 or page 56. We're going to rise, and if you're at home and you haven't yet recited Kiddush, if you have some wine there, you're going to lift up that cup and we're going to sanctify this Rosh Hashanah with Kiddush. I invite you all to rise, please.
What page did you say, Rabbi?
Page 24 or page 56.
I'm on 56, I think. Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri harafem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mika'am ורוממנו מכל לשון וקילשנו במצוותיו ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה את יום הזיכרון הזה יום תרועה מקרא קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים ודברך אמת וקיים לעד ברוך אתה אדוני מלך כל הארץ מקדש ישראל מלך כל הארץ Israel, ay, 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 melech kol haaretz, mekadesh Israel, melech kol haaretz, mekadesh Israel, melech kol haaretz, mekadesh Israel, v'yom hazikaron. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Standing for Aliyah, page 58 or page 25.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hano latet gedula leosef
Reshit
shelo asanu ki goyei ha'aratzot velo samanu ki mishpachot ha'adama shelo ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ועולים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטש שמיים ויוצר הארץ ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Seated. By the way, in line with what Rabbi Galko spoke about in innovation and experimentation, you might have noticed we've been kind of integrating things that are live and videos as well. So by the way, those of you who are at home and are watching, the videos that you saw, the congregation here saw as well. We couldn't have a full choir because of COVID restrictions, of course. And so we thought, why not experiment a little bit and to show the videos that people loved last year and new videos as well that are being created for just this year as well to kind of spice things up, and look forward to hearing from those of you who are actually in attendance here in the sanctuary what you thought about it, if it changed a little bit. We're going to continue doing it through the High Holy Days. As an example, we're going to share now Achat Sha'alti, either page 27 or page 66, and we're going to, as you read Hebrew or English, share with everybody a video. Achat Sha'alti.
אחת שאלתי מאדוני אותה אבקש. אחת שאלתי מאדוני אותה אבקש. שבתי בבית אדוני כל ימי חיי, לחזות בנועם אדוני ולבקר בהיכלו, לעשות בנועם אדוני ולבקר בהיכלו. To be close to you, Achat Sha'alti, one thing I ask, to dwell in your house.
This time of memorial, whether you're here in the sanctuary and recalling a loved one still in a period of mourning, or perhaps the Yortzeit week, we invite you to rise, either page 26 or page 64, as well as at home if you wish to rise. We're also cognizant of the first Yortzeit of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And at a time of Texas and laws and concern about reproductive rights for women, we remember her and the messages that she taught. For all those reciting Kaddish, we join together. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Amen. Ve'alma divra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael v'agalav v'zman kari v'meru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'me'omaya v'yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran b'alma v'meru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'meru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'meru. Amen. May God establish His peace in the heavens, grant peace and harmony for us, for all of Israel and all of humanity, as we say, Amen. Before I finish with just a little story, I just want to acknowledge the choir here, paired down there, the Fred Gantz and Hoishes. What a pleasure to have you here with us. And Chazan Stein, Chazan Mimi, really to inspire us through all the challenges that we have here in terms of COVID protocols. Everybody here, by the way, not only has shown proof of vaccination that are here, but are wearing their masks. We actually, by the way, clergy just took PCR tests within the last 36 hours and were negative as well. So doing all we can to protect everybody that comes into our sanctuary. And those of you at home, we're going to continue to bring these services to you and share with you. So here's the question: how highly do you think of yourselves in comparison to other people? How do you usually rank yourself? So in a survey by 2 Ohio researchers, 25% of the respondents, 25%, said that they were in the top 1% of getting along well with others. In a survey of faculty at the University of Nebraska, 68% rated themselves in the top 25% for teaching ability. In a similar survey, 87% of MBA students at Stanford University rated their academic performance as above the median. A separate study of college students found that 93% of respondents in the U.S. believed that they were above average in driving ability. Right? But if it's only 50% that can be above and 50%, I'm looking here at a mathematician here, right? It doesn't work, does it? These statistics, right? The Mets just would not deal with these statistics at all. They would not work. But the idea is that we tend to think very highly of ourselves, all right? And there's actually a term for this. In the world of psychology, it's known as illusory superiority, or above average effect, or superiority bias. It reflects how people have a tendency to overestimate their own capabilities in relation to the abilities of others, believing themselves to be superior. I won't get into the psychology of it, but the principle is that we believe that we are all better than average in all the things that we do by and large. So, for example, it wouldn't surprise you that most people overestimate their IQ. In a classic 1977 study, 94% of professors rated themselves above average related to their peers. 94%. In another study, 32% of employees at a software company said that they performed better than 19 out of 20 of their colleagues. 32% believed that they were the one, 19 out of 20. Now, I imagine if you start to think about yourselves in terms of intelligence and goodness, professional capabilities, problem solving, leadership, you probably would say, I am above average in all of those areas. Now this tie into Rosh Hashanah. The idea is that we should think highly of ourselves on Rosh Hashanah. Right? It's a time to begin thinking about our own potential. It's a time when it is good for all of us to believe that we are better than average when it comes to our ability to change. It's a good time to be better than average in our ability to make amends for the wrongs that we've done. That we are better than average in our ability to make a difference. You see, this illusion of superiority is important this time of year. To believe that we are capable of all the best efforts of our heart, of all the best desires to be the best that we can be. When we believe in ourselves, we then have the chance to succeed. We pray for all of us that it will be a Shana Tova, a year of goodness and of change and of potential and of being the best selves that we can be. We're going to conclude our service now with the Shana Tova. Invite you, those of you who are here, to rise. We're going to share with a video, but we want you all to join together with us.